might find it hard to believe, but today's passage and theme were actually set back in December. Long before the events of the past week were known about, at least by any human. Matthew 7:25 says, "And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat on that house. But it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock." So how's everyone doing? Tough week in lots of ways. I've got to be honest, I was a little bit excited to break out some camping gear. And cooking up on the gas and on the charcoal and the making, I love problem solving stuff, and so that was kind of fun. And I've got to be a little bit honest, as much as I really, by last night, our power came on last night, by last night I was pretty glad when the power came back on. But there was kind of part of me that was like, it'll be really fun to do church with no power, right? Like maybe at a celebration, we could have just left it off. Another week. It's interesting when big events like the ones we've seen since the Wednesday night. That was only Wednesday night. Feels like last year, but the big events like we see on Wednesday night, storms in country towns, small towns, in cities. In Australia, they tend to bring out the best in community, I think. And yeah, there are some gooses out there. It brings out the worst in some people as well. But in particular, I think it was so. It was as a shepherd in this church, as one of the pastors, one of the elders in this church, to either be here or drive past and see people from this community, this church here, just giving themselves so freely for the sake of those in need was great. And not in the least because I just want to puff people up, but Andrew, thank you so much for the way that you facilitated that. And there were a lot of people helping, people coming in and out, but Karen and Zane in particular, I just want to say thank you for the way that you and there were so many others, so many other people who just, when things were struggling in their own house, when they were going through the same thing as other people were going through, who just poured out love for this community and served them so freely, and I want to honour them. Thank you very much. And it's been a tough week in lots of ways, for all of us. We're pretty dependent on lights being on when we flick a switch, or there being something cold in that cupboard that you open up, and it's just there, right? Or just being able to go, I need to get some fuel. I'll just duck down the street and grab some. We're very dependent on these things. And when they're gone, it can be really unsettling. Really unsettling. And I was thinking about this during the week in reflecting on what I was going to be talking about today, and thinking about the difference that it makes when you have already, before these big storms arrive, before the big events, how prepared are you for when the storm comes? If it catches you off guard and you don't have candles in the house. And we had candles in the house, but they were all the stinky variety. No unscented. I'm like, next time, after this is done, I'm going down and buying some unscented candles. Every room in the house smelt something like you were just going through a mystery tour of your senses. And if you're not prepared when the storm comes, it certainly can catch you off guard and make things even worse. And there are storms that we face in life which aren't the storm variety that we just faced in this last week. Things that happen out of the blue, things that occur without you knowing and maybe unprepared for. And I suggest this morning that the difference in how you respond to that is what you have prepared in advance for. Where you have decided to establish your foundation in life and what you truly cling to that will inform your values, what things you hold to. Now, there's a song that we sing regularly here in this church, and the bridge says, "Rain came and wind blew, but my house was built on you. And I'm safe with you. And I'm going to make it through because I'm standing strong on you. Yeah, I'm going to make it through because my house is built on you." But like most songs, we need to sing them with some discernment. Because in the case of that particular song, if we were to put the emphasis on the wrong line, we'd get all this wrong. The line that I'm thinking about says, "And I'm going to make it through because I'm standing strong on you." And I wonder, is that it, right? Is that the answer to making it through the storms of life? And it's about how strong you are. How strong are you, right? How much grit do you have? How much of an Aussie battler can you claim to really be? No, that's not the answer at all. And fortunately, that's not the end of the song, because the song goes on from there and it repeats the line. It says, "Yeah, I'm going to make it through because my house is built on you." And songs like these often take their inspiration from that famous parable that Jesus tells of the houses that were built on different foundations, one stone and one sand. And you may be familiar with that, but in case you're not, let's read it together. Matthew chapter 7, verse 24. Follow along in your Bible. I'm going to read from the English Standard Version. Matthew 7. Verse 24 says this: "Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell. And great was the fall of it." Now that word picture, the word picture of the houses, the storm, the floods, it's powerful, right? It's a powerful word picture that Jesus uses. Big storms, that's fresh in our memory. Houses that endure. Houses that don't. I mean, if you've taken a bit of a drive around Raymond Terrace in the last few days just to get out of the house or get the kids out of the house or something, you'll have seen the damage, right? And it seems almost indiscriminate, doesn't it? Like some houses with trees through them or lines that are down and places that seem almost untouched. Some of you have had damage to your homes in this storm. Some of you have gone, "Oh, it was just sort of inconvenient, but that's about all." All of those images are powerful and easy to relate to, especially on the days like we've just had this week. And of course, this is where The preacher is meant to pause and look around the room, leaving just enough room to build anticipation, and then pick some poor, unfortunate person out, look at them in the eye, and say, I'm going to pick you, Matt. I know you can take it, mate, you'll be right. Are you building your life on the rock? Right? Are you building your life on Jesus? Which isn't bad, let's be honest. That's a good question to ask. But it's also a bit vague. I mean, what does it actually mean to build your life on the rock? What does it mean to build your life on Jesus? Well, fortunately, we don't have to guess. We don't have to sort of concoct some sort of religious-sounding answer that makes us sound really clever, full of sort of that mumbo-jumbo type of spiritualism that we sometimes go on with. Jesus tells us exactly and very plainly what he means when he says, build your life on the rock. Here's my summary of it, and then I'll try and show you why I summarized it like this. Jesus' answer to what does it mean to build your life on the rock is this. Listen to Jesus, do what he says. That's not complicated. I didn't say it was easy, but it's certainly not complicated. We don't have to do some sort of really special Bible college-inspired interpretation of the Bible to get to that conclusion. He simply says, if you are a person who hears what I say and then does what I say, your life will be like a wise man who builds his house on a rock and the winds came. And if you are a person who hears what I say and does not do them, you will be like a foolish person who builds their house on the sand, the wind came, etc. All right? So let's just set this passage in context for a moment. Matthew 7, funnily enough, comes after Matthew 5 and Matthew 6 and then Matthew 7. It's funny the way that happens in the Bible. And those three chapters are what are famously known as the Sermon on the Mount, arguably one of the greatest pieces of public teaching ever heard. And the Sermon on the Mount is about living life in such a way that it demonstrates that your righteousness, your right standing with God is built on who God is and not what you're able to achieve. If I could try and really generally summarize the Sermon on the Mount. That's why Jesus all the way says, you've heard it say that you shouldn't commit adultery, right? To pick one. But if you've looked lustfully at someone in your heart, you have already committed adultery. See, we place sort of certain rules in our life, certain standards in our life, and we say, if we can meet up to these standards, we're okay. And Jesus says, no, you're not. Your standards are too low. You have to set the bar where God sets them. And so you need a righteousness which is greater than your own. We need the righteousness that God can provide. And that's the summary of a Sermon on the Mount. And then he gets to the end of his sermon and he's going to wrap it up. He's going to conclude his sermon and send everyone home. And this is how he wraps it up. He said, if you've heard what I've had to say to you today, Matthew 5, Matthew 6, Matthew 7. If you've heard what I've had to say to you today and you go and do that, you're a wise person who's built their life on the rock. But if you've sat and heard what I've had to say today and then just ignore it, just think, well, that was entertaining, or at least we got free lunch, or we got to charge our devices while we were listening, and you don't actually do anything in your life about what Jesus has just told you, he says, you're like a foolish person who builds their house on sand. And notice, it's not about who gets protected from the storm, right? The person who built their house on the rock and the person who built their house on the sand experience the same storm. This is not about going, I've got all the right things in my life, I'm going to do all the right things for Jesus, and he's going to protect me from the storm. That's not the case. He's going to protect you in the storm, and there's a big difference. All right, let's have a closer look at it. I want to just sort of make a couple of observations about this, and we're going to see if we can keep the theme of last week going and actually finish close to 10:30ish. Matthew 7, 24 and 25 in particular. This is where Jesus really drives this idea about building on the rock. Everyone who hears these words of mine, does them, will be like a man who built his house on the rock. Like what Jesus has to say, how Jesus points you to where righteousness really is, how Jesus warns us against resting or relying on our own ability to sort life out for ourselves or live up to some sort of moral standard that makes us a good person. Jesus warns us about that and says, you need to look past that and you need to look to me. That's what the Sermon on the Mount has really been about. It's been about dismantling our confidence and rebuilding it where it needs to rest, and that's in Jesus. And so when we do that, this foundation that is produced in our life is like, Jesus likens it to a bedrock. You know, this sort of deep foundation that isn't shifting and moving with the various circumstances of the weather systems in our world. And so he's able to say that the rain fell, the floods came, because if you decide this morning, I want to build my life on the rock of Jesus, which means I'm going to listen to what he has to say and I'm going to do it, and you put your house, your security, your life on that foundation, there could be another storm tomorrow. It might come. And if it's not tomorrow, then maybe it'll be the day after, or the week after, or next summer. But the storm will come. Those who survive the storms of life, those whose houses remain intact, those that did not fall, are those who take seriously the reality that their life has to be built on something greater and better than what they have to offer, the resources that they have. Obedience to Jesus is the cornerstone of a resilient and enduring life. And it points other people to Christ as the ultimate foundation of their life and hope. And the key word in that sentence was obedience to Jesus. I'm the first person in the room to say that there have been too many days, too many weeks, too many months where I knew what Jesus had to say. I've grown up in the incredibly blessed circumstances of having parents who loved Jesus and loved me, provided a nice, secure home for me, and demonstrated and taught me what Jesus would want for my life. I can't say I don't know what Jesus wants for my life, right? I haven't heard what Jesus has to say. I have the Bible in front of me. I have my history behind me. And so now it comes down to, Chris, are you willing to trust what Jesus had to say enough to walk those steps? To live in obedience to what Jesus has to say? So this isn't about, well, how much do you know what Jesus is saying? This is not about, how many Bible verses can you quote off by heart? Or do you know where all the books of the Bible are? This has nothing to do with that. This is all about what Jesus has told you. Are you willing to trust him and follow him? That's building on the rock. But then, of course, Jesus gives us a warning. Matthew 7:26, everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. There's a certain type of folly, old sort of word, foolishness, about choosing to construct on an unstable foundation. We don't have to have big storms, just foundations move depending on the subsoil that you've built your house on. And you probably see it if you live in an older house, sometimes even brand new estates that have been pushed through really quickly. There's a couple of builders in the room. They know what I'm talking about, don't they? It doesn't take long. Gyprock, it's not really very strong in certain directions, right? You put it on the wall and something shifts in the house and what do you see? Like cracking through the gyprock. Or brickwork. Some of the brick houses that we've seen around us and they're cracking along the mortar lines, right? And starting to open up. And you see some of the older places around and they've got those big steel bolts that are sort of holding the whole place together and they're trying to keep it all intact. And there have been times maybe in your life where you have felt like that. The cracks are starting to show. Right? Things have moved, things have shifted, and you're not sure how you should respond or in whose strength you're responding, and soon the cracks begin to show in your life. And they certainly have in mine. And Jesus warns us. There's a type of foolishness in choosing to construct on sand. Those who have heard Jesus but ignore Jesus. Those who've heard what he had to say but wouldn't continue to follow after him or think that they've got a better way. Right, these houses, these lives, they collapse under storms, Jesus said. It's not that they're more susceptible to getting a storm. We're all in the same boat there. The storms are going to hit all of us. But the houses that collapse, the lives that collapse under these storms, I think symbolize the futility of relying on anything else but Christ. So where is your reliance this morning? What are you relying on to get you through? Maybe that's a great indicator of the sort of foundation that you are building on. I want to finish with just the last couple of things that Jesus said, and it's after the main part of the story of the wise and foolish builders. Matthew 7:28 says this, and when Jesus finished these sayings, this is the end of the sermon, right? The end of the Sermon on the Mount. They've sung their closing song. They've done their benediction. Everyone's heading home. Here's what they were talking about. When Jesus finished these words, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one who had authority and not as their scribes, not as their own religious guides. What I want to highlight to you as we finish this morning is that the authority that you are looking for in your life can't be found in all the different voices out there that you so often want to turn your ear to. The authority that you are looking for in life can only be found in the voice of Jesus. I want you to recognize this morning his voice in your life as a foundation that is worth building on. Which means, hear what he says. do what he says. It's not complicated. It's also not easy. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying it's just about you having like, oh, really, Chris? I've just got to do what Jesus says and that's it. If only you told me earlier, right? It's not an easy thing. It's a daily choice. It is a minute-by-minute choice. Just as though in the last few days, for the 20th time, when you forgot that there wasn't cold things in the fridge and I'm looking for something, oh, that's right. Or yesterday, before my power came on, we were planning meals. And when you're planning meals, when you can't get anything, you tend to plan meals meal by meal, right? What are we going to have right now? What have we got to do right now? And the local shops had reopened. I still didn't have power at home, but the local shops had reopened. And I was out doing a job at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I suddenly thought, oh, instead of making 2 trips out, I should just duck to the shops now and grab what we need for dinner. Of course, I didn't have anywhere to put those things when I got home because my fridge was not working. You see, choosing every day and every moment to listen to what Jesus has to say and obey is often a every moment of the day decision.
That's good.
It's thinking through it. What does this mean between when church finishes and 3 o'clock this afternoon? Like, what's going to happen for the next 3 hours? How am I going to listen to what Jesus has to say and do it?
Yeah.
It's an every day, every moment, every minute, realigning our authority source. Am I the authority, or is Jesus the authority? The crowds then were astounded. They said, there's no one that we've ever heard that speaks with such authority like Jesus does. So what authority do you rest in and recognize? So this isn't really about how well you can hold up in the storm. Or at least as though it has something to do with how strong you are. How much resilience you have, internally, that you're ready for it. This has nothing to do with the quality of the house, and it has everything to do with the dependability of the foundation. The house that you build might be very basic, very simple, just a lean-to. But if it is built on the foundation that Christ provides, there is a great confidence that you can have in the storms of life. We sang a song a little bit earlier, one that we sing here regularly again. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your life to those around me. And we've already sung it this morning. And we said, I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. And I will put my trust in you alone. And I will not be shaken. We're about to sing a final song. And the words that I quoted from the beginning, I think, are a part of this song. Maybe. If it's not, Luke will make it up. The rain came and the wind blew, but my house was built on you, and I'm safe with you, and I'm going to make it through because I'm standing strong on you. Discernment moment, not because you're strong. I'm going to make it through because my house is built on you. All right? Let's sing that together, or something similar, whatever Luke decides on.